Hello, good day to you. It's been a couple days since I've been able to do this, and so good to be back at it. Thought I had a couple days there this past week, a rotator cuff injury, but it kind of went away, so probably something else then. But going to continue on reading from Knowing Jesus. We're almost done with the book. Oh my gosh. Um, and he just got done talking about how in knowing Jesus, folks will have to learn how to renounce the desire for experiences as they discover that those very desires, spiritual seeming as they are riddled with envy and rivalry. It is worth pointing out here now, in the history of the church, so many of the saints, but not all, have been deeply reticent about their personal experiences of Jesus. This is not to say that they haven't had them, but the very hallmark of their being genuine was that the recipients had a horror of publicity. The key reason for this was twofold. They had a deep sense of the ease with which they could deceive themselves, and they did not want whatever they might have experienced to be a stumbling block, a motive for jealousy or rivalry, among those who did not have such experiences. In short, they did not want to scandalize others. That desire to help others avoid stumbling blocks is about as clear an indication as could be had that a real knowledge of Jesus is at work. For the making possible discipleship in others is precisely teaching imitation without rivalry as Jesus taught it. The third nefarious consequence of any great insistence on personal experiences in knowing Jesus is that this ends up constituting a barrier to faith for non believers. If what they hear is a great deal of talk about personal experiences with the suggestion or affirmation that without such an experience you're really not in, then what better excuse is there for not bothering about taking faith seriously? I might think as follows: if there were a God and he wanted me to take him seriously, then he would give me one of these experiences which would make me a Christian, and I would take him seriously. Since he hasn't given me one of these experiences, I need not bother about religion. Well, this is nonsense. God has made God's self publicly known more or less everywhere by this stage of the 20th century in the person of a publicly executed victim. The revelation of the forgiving victim is publicly available more or less everywhere on the face of the planet. And faith comes by this revelation being preached by those for whom it has become something to which they can give witness. Now, please don't let me give you the impression that I'm against personal experiences of the love of God or knowing Jesus, far from it. But these will happen to whom they will happen, and are in no sense a criterion for anything at all. Even those who have them may do better to ignore them on the traditional grounds that one small work of charity is of more value before God than the highest degree of mystical ecstasy. Those who don't have them should certainly ignore them on the grounds that no desire that is fueled by jealousy can be of God. How can God give us what God wants for us if we are so determined to have the same sort of feeling that we hear X or Y has? The problem with jealousy is that it involves desiring something in imitation of someone else. When what someone else has doesn't suit us, but we can't receive what does suit us because we are too caught up in the imitation of the other. No private experience of Jesus as one's friend, as one's mate, as someone you talk to across the room, is any substitute for the much more radical knowledge of Jesus which I have been trying to put before you, and whose effect on a person's life is a slow but massive empowerment of the whole of that person's life. They are empowered to break free from a series of ways of relating and deepen into other ways of relating, whose consequences may indeed be felt in their own lives, but more strikingly, could be perceived and described by any onlooker, and would clearly involve a turning towards the victim. Now, when I use a phrase like a slow but massive empowerment of the whole of a person's life, I'm not making this up. There's a passage in John 14 in which Judas asks Jesus, "Lord, how is it that you will manifest yourself to us and not to the world?" Jesus replies, "If someone loves me, they will keep my word, and my Father will love him and will come to him and make our home with him." Now, this seems at first a very odd answer to the question, how will you manifest yourself to us? It is odd because it does not talk about a manifestation to anyone at all in terms of an appearance outside you or me, by which we might know or see or recognize the one appearing. The manifestation is within the life and relational patterns of the person. John's terminology is different from the one I use, but the phrase keep my word, just like the phrase keep my commandments, covers the area of loving imitation. As is shown in the giving of the new commandment, love each other even as I have loved you. The element of imitation is inscribed forever in the commandment to love. So when Jesus replies to Judas, if someone loves me, they will keep my word, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them. He's not talking about some Kantian straining of the will, but of an imitative pattern by which the person becomes possessed by the other. We will come to them and make our home with them. By keeping the word, imitating that love, we allow ourselves to be possessed, and that is how Jesus is made manifest to us and not to the world, by ourselves being made into signs of his possession of us. That is exactly the whole empowerment of a person's life to which I referred. It means that Jesus is not other to us, as a bad conscience is other to us, a representative of some force that's bullying us. Jesus is other to us as God is other to us, able to move us entirely from within our freedom without displacing it. If you want evidence for Jesus being God, that is it, and John offers just this as evidence that Jesus is, when he quotes Jesus as saying, "In that day you will know that I am in the Father, and you in me, and I in you." Jesus makes himself known as God by turning us into other Christs, at the level at which only God can change us. Now, in what is positively the last section of this book, let me turn to one slightly surprising suggestion, caused by looking at John's Gospel. The suggestion is this, that Jesus is really not at all interested in people knowing him. Let me explain. There is no sense in which Jesus is an end in himself. And this is part of the presence of the one who frees us from stumbling blocks. Supposing you want to go to a concert, and before the concert starts, someone comes on stage and gives an explanation of what is going to happen so that you will appreciate it better. Well, that's fine insofar as the announcer comes on quickly, does his or her bit, and gets off again. However, you've probably been to occasions when the announcer seems to have misunderstood their role. They seem to think that the public actually wants to listen to them, is amused by them, regards them as of some importance. This is embarrassing, because what is revealed is the person's self-importance, quite out of proportion to this real role as a signpost to something else. They have made the mistake of allowing themselves to think that they are an end in themselves. This is the sort of thing that happens when you hear people making speeches about themselves rather than about the person they're supposed to be introducing, or retired film stars who are suddenly given a chance to be center stage after 10 years in which no one has heard a thing about them. They revel in it, rather pathetically. Well, Jesus was under no such misapprehension. Throughout John's Gospel, he's pointing to his Father. He well understands that the true purpose of his presence is to reveal the Father. Like all human beings, he is constituted by his relation to what is other than himself. In this case, the other is not the social other, the world with its distortions and violence mixed in with its love and goodness, but the completely transcendent other, the gratuitous other, the Father, whose gracious love for him Jesus knows. Now the green blade rises from the buried grain. We that in dark earth many days has lain. Love lives again, that with the dead has been. Love is come again like wheat arising green. In the grave they laid him, love by hatred slain, thinking that he would never wake again. Laid in the earth like grain that sleeps unseen. Love is come again like wheat arising green. Forth he came at Easter like the risen grain. He that for 3 days in the grave had lain, raised from the dead, my living Lord is seen. Love is come again like wheat arising green. When our hearts are wintry, grieving or in pain, your love can touch us back to life again. Fields of our hearts that dead and bare have been, love is come again like wheat arising green.